We're always trying to improve our writing, but what happens when our writing is improved by writing poorly? Welcome back to the Young Writers Vlog. Today we're going to be talking about the rare occurrence when you don't actually want to write well. In this video series I spent a lot of time talking about the pitfalls and dangers that can lead to bad writing, but sometimes you actually want to go down those paths. Sometimes you want to do the thing that you're not supposed to do. And it's not a bad idea. Because sometimes bad writing is the goal. Sometimes a story needs to be told badly, has to be littered with cliches and overused story arcs, and just be generally unpleasant to experience. But why? In what circumstance are you supposed to do this? Are you supposed to ignore all of the good advice you've received over the years and just do the exact opposite of that? This is a concept often referred to as stylistic suck, when something is bad on purpose. Now, there are three main reasons why you should do this. Tell a bad story or tell a regular story just really terribly. This most commonly happens when you are telling a story inside your own story. Whenever one of your characters is telling a story or they go to see a play, it's sometimes useful for that story to be bad. Now, this is most often done for parody or satire reasons, to tell a story that's so pretentious or over the top that the audience can recognize that they're not supposed to like the story. They're supposed to recognize that this is just trash. Telling a bad story inside your story often serves a meta purpose by making your story seem better by comparison. Because if you somehow manage to tell a story that was better than the story you used to contain that story, it's gonna feel really weird. How are your characters better storytellers than you are? That's what? But of course that almost never happens, because if your characters could tell a better story than you are, you would just use those abilities to tell a better story. Now, of course, this isn't even counting all of the situations where the show being bad is actually a plot point, usually exploited for comedy, where the characters putting on the show or telling the story don't realize how bad they are at it, and all the other characters have to deal with this awkward situation of telling them that they're actually bad at it. It's very awkward. Now, of course, in most cases, when there's a story inside of a story, it's just going to be worse than the surrounding story. And this is why it's important to make it intentionally bad. Because if it's only a little bit worse than your outside writing, it's going to feel awkward and weird, and people might just be turned off by your bigger story because of how bad this writing is. Which is why sometimes you just want to make it absolutely terrible so that no one can doubt that you're doing this on purpose. You want to use as many cliches as possible. You want the actors to be shouting their emotions at the audience. Anything you can do to tell the audience that this is not supposed to be good will go a long way in making sure that they get it. Now, the second reason you might stylistically decide to make something bad is to accomplish what I like to call the B-movie aesthetic. Otherwise known as camp. Sometimes your story just isn't meant to be taken seriously. Sometimes you just don't have the technical capacity to make something outstanding or groundbreaking, whether that's because you lack the experience, budget, or time to make it as good as it could possibly be. And when these limitations come around, you have two choices. You can try your best to make it as good as possible, and 9 times out of 10, those limitations are going to get the better of it, and you're not going to like the finished product. And option B, you could not even try to make something good. And when you stop trying to make an objectively good piece of media, you can find it very freeing. Nowhere is this more clear than in B-movies or things looking for that B-movie aesthetic. Movies like Kung Fury or Wolf Cop that are independent projects that know that they're not going to make the best movie ever, so instead they decide to just have a good time with the medium. These movies aren't concerned with telling an amazing story or making you empathize with the characters, but they are trying to have a good time with the medium and hoping that you are too. They're often littered with cheesy lines, cliches, ham-fisted actors, and just a bunch of over-the-top action sequences that don't really make sense in the story. But they're not trying to make the best movie you have ever seen. They're not trying to win an Academy Award. They're just trying to make you have a good time watching this movie. And maybe inviting your friends to watch this movie because it's just so different than anything you've ever experienced. And there's two reasons why making something intentionally bad works in this scenario. First off, it's easier to make a bad thing than a good thing. If there's technical limitations that are preventing you from making something as good as you can, deciding to make something bad can often just erase those technical limitations immediately. And second, if you intentionally put bad elements into your work, you can put them in such a way that makes them as entertaining as possible. Because accidentally making mistakes can often just make your work fall apart. But intentionally putting those mistakes in means that you can make your work shine because of those mistakes. And you can have those mistakes piled together in a way that makes the finished product better than the sum of its parts. Because if you have fun with the work and don't take everything all that seriously, it's easier to make the audience have fun with your work and take your work less seriously. And it makes it easier for your audience to gloss over the technical issues or the giant plot hole that undermines your whole story, because it doesn't really matter. And the third and most complex situation in which you make something bad is a rather new concept known as, well, press posting, as I'm going to call it from here on out. Okay, so sometimes people don't want to watch Oscar-nominated films. Sometimes they don't want to read Nobel Prize-winning literature and the like. Quote-unquote good literature often requires a heavy emotional investment and thorough engagement with the work in order to enjoy it to its fullest, kind of like eating a luxurious tuxedo cake. And sometimes you just don't have the energy to do that. Sometimes you just want to grab a box of chocolate chip cookies and just eat them one roll at a time. Media works the same way. Sometimes people just want to turn their brains off and consume media that's objectively bad. These are pieces of media that aren't meant to be on the top of anyone's best of list, and they tend to leave no lasting impressions and are forgotten soon after they're created. But they're still entertaining, fun, and silly. Not including news, a lot of blogs and ephemeral content tends to fall under this categories. If you've ever turned on Food Network and just let it play in the background for 7 hours, you know that this is not meant to be like the height of television or the height of media entertainment, but it's meant to be something that you can just watch and enjoy watching and not think too hard about, because it's both simple, engaging, fun, entertaining, and often silly. But even then, these ephemeral pieces of media aren't necessarily bad. They've simply focused on simplicity over complexity. But there's another similar type of media that works in the same operations, but often is intentionally bad. And now I'm going to introduce you to a little thing called memes.
Crump with your sweetie pie.
Ugh. So what just happened there? The best of memes focus on using an extraordinary technical ability and talent and effort to bring to life a terrible, terrible idea. This works because when you make something objectively bad, but do it well, you create this bizarre tension between something made well, but telling you something that is nonsense. It's unique by its own design, and because it takes so little time or mental investment to engage in, it can be massively interesting to watch. Like other pieces of ephemera, they exist in the moment and move on when the time passes, becoming nothing more than a memory or a shared experience with a friend. But while it's in the spotlight, it can be fascinating to watch it devolve into madness as thousands of iterations of the memes continue on until it reaches a point where its original meaning has no sense anymore, and it's become just an exercise in repeating common phrases and images in a strange and weird way of talking about the world now. And what is most striking is that these excel when they're objectively bad, because no one talking about or spreading memes is particularly interested in finding the next gem of literature or creation in the world. This is an audience not looking to be engaged, they're looking to be surprised. And when you stumble across something that's bizarre, strange, and unique, it's very difficult to take your eyes away from it because you want to see how far it's going to go or how far it can be taken. And then, once you see that, you move on to the next surprising thing that you can see. And so in the end, whether or not something is technically good or objectively bad, if it ends up making an impact on your audience, then it's a job well done. And so every once in a while, you're going to be presented with an option to try and make something good that probably won't turn out very well, or to make something bad that will probably be entertaining to watch when it's done. Don't be afraid to make the bad choice every once in a while. Kind of like deciding whether or not you want to make a video about sucking on purpose.